nicknamed the Deacon of Death.
Sammy, did you do it? Confess?
Samuel Smithers was a deacon at a Plant City church back in 1996 when he murdered Christy Cowan and Denise Roach. Investigators said he paid both women for sex, then dumped their bodies in a Plant City pond. Smithers was sentenced to death in 1999 and has been sitting on death row for nearly 30 years. Now, at 72, he is set to die by lethal injection. The 14th execution of the year, the most in state history.
After 26 years, 2 months, and 16 days on death row, Samuel Lee Smithers faced his fate in Florida. He was 72 years old when the lethal injection ended his life inside the chamber at Florida State Prison in Stark. At 6:15 p.m. on October 14, 2025, making him the oldest person executed in Florida's modern death penalty era, Smithers was pronounced dead. When asked for final words, he said only two: "No, sir." It was May 1996 in the small city of Plant City, Florida. The spring nights gave no sign of what was about to unfold. Two women, Denise Roach and Christy Cowan, worked the streets of Tampa's Hillsborough Avenue, struggling with addiction and trading their bodies to survive. They had no way of knowing that danger drove a pickup truck with a bad boy's stencil, piloted by a man they thought was just another regular customer. Behind the wheel sat Samuel Smithers, a quiet church deacon in his 40s. To his neighbors, he was helpful and trustworthy, a married father who maintained properties and served his Baptist congregation. What they could not see was the darkness hidden beneath his religious facade. A man with brain damage, childhood trauma, and a history of arson who sexually aroused himself through destruction. On those May nights, Denise and Christy disappeared. No missing person reports were filed. No searches were organized. Women like them vanished from Hillsborough Avenue all the time, and the world rarely noticed or cared. But Denise and Christy were already gone, taken to a remote 27-acre property in Plant City, trapped behind a locked gate, where their vulnerability became the target of brutal violence. By late evening on May 28th, the pattern of missing women would evolve into something far darker. The discovery of two bodies floating in a pond on property maintained by a church deacon shocked not just Plant City, but the entire Tampa Bay area. The crime scene revealed a level of violence and premeditation that was stunning. Drag marks leading to dark water, a bloody axe being cleaned, and two women who had suffered unimaginable terror before death. The arrest came swiftly, but the trial, sentencing, and appeals would drag on for more than 2 decades. Samuel Lee Smithers' name would forever be tied to his nickname, the Deacon of Death, a case that sparked debates about brain damage, religious hypocrisy, and whether executing elderly inmates serves justice in America. But to understand how a respected church leader from Plant City became one of Florida's most notorious killers of vulnerable women, how 2 spring nights in 1996 turned into tragedy, and why his case ended nearly 3 decades later, at age 72, inside an execution chamber making Florida history. We have to go back to May 1996, back to the property where a trusted maintenance man had a key and unlimited access. Back to the moment Denise Roach and Christy Cowan climbed into a truck they would never climb out of again. This is the story of Samuel Lee Smithers, the Deacon of Death. If you're drawn to stories of justice, betrayal, and the people who reach a point of no return, make sure to subscribe to No Way Out. This is where true crime meets truth. Real cases, real consequences. The darkest corners of human decision, broken down into tiny pieces, so you can see every detail and make your own conclusions better. Samuel Lee Smithers came into the world on January 30th, 1953. He was born in a small town in Tennessee, a place where neighbors knew each other and families kept their problems behind closed doors. What happened behind the Smithers family door would shape Samuel into someone dangerous. The trouble started when Samuel was just a baby. Like many infants, he slept in a crib. One day, somehow, Samuel fell out of that crib. He dropped to the floor and hit his head. It was not a small bump. He hit his head hard. His family never took him to a doctor for the injury. The damage to his brain went untreated. His father was physically abusive, beating his mother regularly in front of the children. His mother coped through religion, but her faith took a dark turn. She believed her children needed to be cleansed of evil spirits. She would line up Samuel and his brothers, Robert and Alvin, and whip them with a belt. She called these sessions exorcisms, claiming she was beating the devil out of them. The brothers grew up in fear of both parents. Their father's fists and their mother's belt created a home without safety. Samuel learned early that violence and religion could exist in the same house, practiced by the same people. At 27, Samuel worked at a gas station. During a robbery, a man struck him over the head with the butt of a shotgun. The blow was severe enough to cause lasting damage. Medical records would later show this second head trauma compounded the injury from his childhood fall. But at the time, Samuel seemed to be living a normal life. By 1973, when he was 20 years old, he met a woman named Sharon. They dated and fell in love. Between 1973 and 1979, they got married. Sharon believed she had found a good man. Samuel and Sharon had a son together. They named him Jonathan. Samuel seemed to be a devoted father. He spent time with Jonathan. He took care of his family. Sharon would later tell people that their marriage was happy. During the same period, Samuel became very involved in his church. He and Sharon attended the First Baptist Church in Plant City, Florida. The church community welcomed them. They saw Samuel as a faithful, reliable member. The church leadership was impressed with Samuel. They asked him to become a deacon. In Baptist churches, deacons are important lay leaders. They help run the church. They set an example for other members. Being chosen as a deacon was an honor. It meant the church trusted Samuel completely. Samuel also took a job at the church as the custodian. He maintained the building and grounds. He made sure everything was clean and in good repair. He was there several days a week, working quietly, doing his job well. To everyone who knew him, Samuel Smithers was exactly what he appeared to be. He was a family man with a wife and son. He was a church deacon who served his congregation. He was a hard worker who did his job without complaint. He was friendly and helpful. Sharon thought she knew her husband. She trusted him. She believed he was a good man who would never hurt anyone. Church members felt the same way. They saw Samuel as one of their most reliable people. If something needed to be done, Samuel would do it. But in 1980, cracks began to show in Samuel's facade. He was living in Tennessee at the time, before the move to Florida. He was serving as a deacon at a Baptist church near Chattanooga, called East Ridge Baptist Church. He was also a volunteer firefighter. People respected him for both roles. Then the church started having fires. The first fire broke out during a church service. Someone had poured kerosene in the building and set it alight. Firefighters, including Samuel, responded to put it out. Samuel was one of the first people on the scene. The church repaired the damage and moved on. But a few weeks later, another fire started. This time, it was in the classroom area of the same church. Again, firefighters responded. Again, Samuel was there to help. Then there was a third incident. A woman in the community woke up one night to pounding on her door. When she opened it, Samuel Smithers stood there with a fire extinguisher in his hands. He told her that her car was on fire. He had brought the extinguisher to help put it out. The woman was grateful at first. But police started to investigate all three fires. They noticed a pattern. Samuel had been the first to report the church fires. Samuel had been the one to alert the woman about her car fire. Samuel was connected to all three incidents. Police arrested Samuel along with two other suspects. During questioning, Samuel did something unexpected. He confessed immediately. He admitted to setting all three fires. He told the police exactly how he had done it. He had used kerosene for the church fires. He had set the woman's car on fire himself. But what Samuel said next shocked the investigators. He told them that setting the fires excited him sexually. The act of starting a fire and watching it burn gave him an erection. He described feeling powerful and aroused when he created destruction. Samuel also said something else strange. He told police that he felt like a hero when he started the fires. He liked being the first one on the scene. He liked being the one who tried to put them out or warn people. He enjoyed the attention and the feeling of being important. When investigators asked why he had done it, Samuel could not give them a clear answer. He said he was not sure of his motives. He just knew that something inside him wanted to start fires and then respond to them. Samuel went to prison for the arson convictions. He served his time. Prison records showed that he behaved well while incarcerated. He followed the rules. He did not cause trouble. Eventually, he was released. After getting out of prison, Samuel returned to Florida. He went back to Sharon and Jonathan. His family took him back. He started attending church again. He found work doing maintenance and landscaping, and he even became a deacon. For the next decade, from the mid-1980s through the mid-1990s, Samuel seemed to live quietly. People who knew him during this time had no idea about his criminal past. Sharon believed her husband had put his past behind him. She thought the fires were an aberration, something that would not happen again. Church friends who learned about the arsons thought the same thing. They believed Samuel had been forgiven and had changed. All of these factors were still inside Samuel Smithers. They were hidden beneath the surface of the helpful maintenance worker and former deacon. Nobody could see what was really going on in his mind. Nobody suspected that the violence and the sexual deviance would emerge again. This time, in a much more terrible form. Samuel was a time bomb waiting to go off. The combination of brain damage, childhood trauma, and deviant sexual impulses would eventually express itself in ways far worse than arson. But in the early 1990s, nobody knew this. Everyone thought Samuel Smithers was just a regular man trying to make a living and support his family. They were wrong. And 25 miles away from Plant City, on the streets of Tampa, two women were living lives that would intersect with Samuel's in the worst possible way. East Hillsborough Avenue in Tampa, Florida, had a reputation. During the day, it was like any other busy street with businesses and traffic. But after dark, it transformed into something else entirely. Women appeared on certain blocks, standing under streetlights, waiting for cars to slow down. These were sex workers. They sold their bodies to survive. Most of them were struggling with drug addiction. Most of them were just trying to make it through one more day. The avenue was where desperation met opportunity, where women with few choices made the only choice they felt they had. Denise Elaine Roach was one of these women. She was 24 years old in 1996. She had been born in Jamaica and came to the United States as a child. Her family had hoped for a better life in America. For a while, things seemed normal. But when Denise was in her early teens, she started using drugs. It began with marijuana, then moved to harder substances. By the time she was in her 20s, she was addicted to crack cocaine. The drug took over her life completely. Denise had 2 daughters. She loved them, but she could not care for them while fighting her addiction. Her daughters went to live with relatives. Denise would see them sometimes, but she was not able to be the mother she wanted to be. The drugs would not let her. On the streets, everyone knew Denise by a different name. They called her New York. Nobody remembers exactly why she got that nickname. Denise had a reputation among the other women on Hillsborough Avenue. She was tough. She did not let clients take advantage of her. If someone tried to cheat her or hurt her, she would fight back. The other women knew they could count on Denise if there was trouble. She looked out for her own. But being tough could only protect her so much. The work was dangerous. Every time a woman got into a car with a stranger, she was taking a risk. Some clients were violent, some were strange, some were dangerous in ways that did not show until it was too late. Christy Elizabeth Cowan was also working at Hillsborough Avenue in 1996. She was 31 years old, older than most of the other women on the street. Her story was different from Denise's, but it ended up in the same place. Christy had not always been a sex worker. She had not always been an addict. She came from a loving family. Her father, John Cowan, adored her. He had watched her grow up with hope and pride. Christy had been smart in school, very smart. She graduated at the top of her high school class. She had dreams of becoming a nurse. She wanted to help people. She wanted to make something of her life. Her father believed she could do anything she set her mind to. But somewhere along the way, Christy discovered crack cocaine. The drug destroyed everything. Her dreams of nursing school disappeared. Her relationship with her family became strained. She started getting arrested for drug possession and prostitution. She went to jail in Connecticut. She went to jail in Florida. Each time she got out, she ended up back on the drugs. Like Denise, Christy had children. She had 2 kids who she could not care for. The knowledge that she had failed as a mother ate at her. But the addiction was stronger than her shame. It was stronger than her love for her children. It was stronger than everything. Back home, Christy's father, John Cowan, watched his daughter's decline with a breaking heart. He was a loving father who had raised Christy with hope and expectations. He had celebrated when she graduated at the top of her class. He had supported her nursing dreams. Now he could only watch as drugs destroyed the bright future she once had. John never gave up on Christy. He never stopped being her father. Even when she was locked up in jail, he would accept her collect calls. They would talk on the phone, and Christy would tell him about her life. She talked about the other women she met in jail and on the streets. On the streets, Christy also had a reputation. Like Denise, she was known for being scrappy. She would fight clients who refused to pay her. She demanded fair treatment. Some of the other women whispered that Christy would sometimes rob clients, taking more money than they had agreed upon. Whether this was true or just street rumors, nobody knew for sure. Both Denise and Christy understood the dangers of their work. They had both been hurt before. They both knew women who had disappeared, some whose bodies were found later, and some who were never seen again. The streets were full of predators. But addiction does not allow for careful choices. When you need drugs badly enough, when you are sick from withdrawal, when the craving takes over your entire body and mind, you cannot afford to be picky. You get into the car. You trust that this time will be safe. You hope the client will be normal, that he will pay what he promised, that he will not hurt you. The women on Hillsborough Avenue had started to notice a regular customer in the mid-1990s. He drove a pickup truck with a bad boy's stencil on the back window. He was white, middle-aged, quiet. He did not seem dangerous. He paid fair prices for sex. He was polite. Some of the women remembered him offering extra money if they would go with him to more remote locations. He mentioned places like Seffner and Plant City, towns outside of Tampa. He said he knew quiet places where they would not be disturbed. One woman named Bonnie Cruz would later remember getting into his truck. He paid her $280 for sex. That was good money, more than most clients paid. He told her his name was Rex. He asked if she would go with him to Seffner for even more money. Something made Bonnie refuse. She could not say exactly what it was. Maybe an instinct, maybe just luck. But she told him no, she would stay in Tampa. The man did not push. He accepted her decision, and that was that. Bonnie never saw him again. Another woman remembered seeing Denise Roach get into a pickup truck with a bad boy's stencil. That was in May 1996. It was the last time anyone saw Denise alive. The woman did not think much of it at the time. Denise got into cars every night. This seemed like just another client. The women on Hillsborough Avenue did not report Denise missing when she stopped showing up. In their world, women disappeared all the time. Sometimes they got arrested and sent to jail. Sometimes they moved to another city. Sometimes they found a way to get clean and left the streets behind. And sometimes they died. Reporting missing persons to the police was not something these women did. Many of them had warrants out for their arrest. Many of them had bad experiences with law enforcement. They learned to handle their own problems, to not involve the police unless absolutely necessary. So when Denise Roach vanished in May 1996, life on Hillsborough Avenue continued as normal. The other women noticed she was gone. They wondered what happened to her. But they did not call the police. They did not file a report. They just kept working, kept surviving, kept getting into cars with strangers and hoping each night would not be their last. None of them knew that Denise was already dead. None of them knew that her body was at the bottom of a pond 25 miles away. And none of them knew that the quiet man with the pickup truck would be back. He had gotten away with murder once. Nothing had stopped him. No one had caught him. No one even knew a crime had happened. That meant he could do it again. The place where Denise Roach's body lay hidden was not some random location chosen in a panic. It was not a spot Samuel Smithers stumbled upon by accident. It was a carefully maintained property that belonged to a respectable woman, a woman who had absolutely no idea what was happening on her land. Marion Whitehurst was an elementary school teacher in Hillsborough County. Every weekday morning she walked into her classroom and greeted young children. She taught them to read and write. She helped them learn math and science. She prepared them for their futures. Parents trusted her with their most precious possessions. Students loved her. Colleagues respected her dedication. Marion was also a widow. Her husband had passed away some years earlier. She now lived alone in her home, managing her life without a partner. Being widowed meant handling things she might have once shared with her husband. It meant making decisions on her own. It meant dealing with property and finances without help. When Marion's mother died, Marion found herself dealing with an inheritance she had not expected. Her mother had owned property in Plant City, a small community about 25 miles east of Tampa. The property Marion inherited was not a small lot. It was not a simple house with a yard. It was substantial. 27 acres of Florida scrubland spread out across the land. For someone unfamiliar with large properties, 27 acres is huge. It is more than 20 football fields. It is enough space to get lost in. A house sat on the property, but it was old and needed work. Several outbuildings dotted the land, structures that might once have been used for farming or storage. A large carport provided covered space for vehicles or equipment. The whole property had the feel of a place that had once been actively used, but had now fallen into disuse. 3 ponds were scattered across the 27 acres. In Florida, ponds like these are common. They form naturally in low-lying areas, filled by rain and groundwater. These particular ponds were surrounded by tall grass that grew thick and wild. Brush and vegetation covered the banks. Trees provided shade and made the ponds feel secluded and private. The entire property was enclosed by a fence, not a decorative fence like you might see in a suburb, but a functional barrier meant to mark property lines and keep people out. At the entrance, a gate controlled access. The gate could be locked, preventing anyone without a key from entering. Marion did not live on the Plant City property. She had her own home closer to where she worked. She had no interest in moving to Plant City or using the land herself. But she also did not want to just abandon 27 acres. Property that size had value. It could be sold. Marion decided to put the property on the market. But she faced a problem that anyone trying to sell rural land faces. The property had to be maintained. Buyers would not be interested in looking at overgrown, neglected land. The grass had to be mowed regularly. The buildings had to be kept in decent repair. Everything needed to look as good as possible to attract serious offers. Marion could not do this maintenance herself. She worked full-time as a teacher. She lived 25 miles away. She did not have the time, energy, or equipment to maintain 27 acres of land. She needed to hire someone. But hiring just anyone was risky. This person would have access to the entire property. They would be there when Marion was not around. They needed to be trustworthy. They needed to actually do the work they were paid to do. They needed to not cause problems or damage. Marion thought about her options. She could hire a professional landscaping company, but that would be expensive for such a large property. She could advertise and hire a stranger, but how could she know if they were reliable? Then she thought of someone closer to home. At the elementary school where Marion taught, she worked with another teacher. This colleague was a friendly woman who often talked about her family. She had a husband who did maintenance and landscaping work. His name was Samuel Smithers. The colleague, whose name was Sharon, spoke highly of her husband. She said Samuel was dependable. She said he was hardworking. She said he could be trusted to do a good job. This recommendation meant a lot to Marion. This was not a stranger from an advertisement. This was the husband of a woman she worked with every day. If Sharon trusted Samuel, Marion felt she could trust him too. But there was another connection that made Marion feel even more confident. Marian and Samuel both attended the same Baptist church. Marian had seen Samuel at services for years. She knew he was a deacon, which in Baptist churches is a position of significant trust and responsibility. Deacons help lead the congregation. They set examples for other members. They are supposed to be men of strong faith and good character. Marian had never heard anything bad about Samuel. He seemed quiet and humble. He was always willing to help around the church. When work needed to be done, Samuel was there to do it. He did not seek attention or praise. He just served faithfully. With these two connections, through Sharon at work and through church, Marian felt comfortable approaching Samuel about the job. She explained her situation. She needed someone to maintain her mother's old property in Plant City. The work would be regular, but not daily. Grass would need to be mowed. Weeds would need to be pulled. Buildings would need basic upkeep. Could Samuel handle this? Samuel said yes. He was interested in the work. Marian and Samuel discussed what exactly needed to be done. They talked about how often he would need to visit the property. They settled on a fair price for his services. Both felt the arrangement would work well. Marian then made a decision that seemed practical and safe at the time. She gave Samuel a key to the gate. Marian was careful, though. She gave Samuel a key to the gate only. She did not give him a key to the house. The house would remain locked. Samuel's job was to maintain the grounds and outbuildings, not to go into the main house. This felt like a reasonable precaution to Marian. The arrangement began in 1995. Samuel would drive from Plant City, where he lived with Sharon and their son Jonathan, out to the property. He would unlock the gate using his key. He would drive onto the land and lock the gate behind him. Then he would spend hours mowing grass, trimming vegetation, and making sure everything looked tidy. Marian would occasionally visit the property to check on progress. Every time she visited, the property looked good. The grass was cut. The grounds were neat. Samuel was clearly doing the work he was being paid to do. Marian felt her decision to hire him had been a good one. As 1995 ended and 1996 began, Marian renewed the arrangement for another year. She and Samuel had worked together for a full year without any problems. Why change what was working? They agreed to continue under the same terms. On May 26, 1996, Marian paid Samuel for work he had completed during the week of May 20th. Marian had no concerns about Samuel. She had no reason to doubt him or to worry about what he might be doing on her property. As far as she knew, Samuel was exactly who he appeared to be. A reliable handyman, a faithful church member, the husband of her teaching colleague, a trustworthy man. But Marian did not know several crucial things. She did not know that 1 year earlier, in 1995, Samuel had been forced to resign his position as deacon at their church. A woman named Mimi had been doing court-ordered community service at the church. This was part of her sentence for some crime. She needed to complete a certain number of hours of community service to satisfy the court. Mimi apparently struggled to complete her required hours. She approached Samuel with a proposition. If Samuel would falsify her timesheets, claiming she had completed more hours than she actually had, Mimi would have sex with him. Samuel agreed to this deal. Someone at the church discovered what was happening. When church leadership learned that their deacon was falsifying community service records in exchange for sex, they confronted Samuel. They gave him a choice. He could resign quietly, or they could make the matter public and remove him forcibly. Samuel chose to resign. The church handled the situation quietly. Not everyone in the congregation learned about it. Marian certainly did not hear about it. Samuel never mentioned it to her. When Marian saw Samuel at church after 1995, she still thought of him as Deacon Smithers. She had no idea he had lost that position. She had no idea he had been caught in a sexual arrangement that violated every principle a deacon was supposed to uphold. Marian also did not know what had happened on her property just 2 weeks before she paid Samuel on May 26. On May 12, 1996, Samuel had driven to Tampa. He had gone to East Hillsborough Avenue, where prostitutes worked. He had picked up a woman named Denise Roach. He had paid her for sex and put her in his truck. Then, he had driven her to Marian's property in Plant City. Samuel had used his key to unlock the gate. He had driven Denise onto the property and locked the gate behind them. They were now on 27 acres of private land, behind a locked gate, miles from the nearest neighbor. Samuel had sex with Denise. That was what he had paid for. But then something else happened. Samuel attacked Denise. He beat her with a bladed weapon, striking her head more than 10 times. He strangled her with his hands, squeezing until bones in her neck broke. He killed Denise Roach on Marion Whitehurst's property. Then Samuel dragged Denise's body across the land to one of the 3 ponds. He threw her body into the water. The pond was deep enough that the body sank. Vegetation around the banks hid any evidence of what had happened. Samuel watched Denise disappear beneath the surface. After disposing of the body, Samuel cleaned himself up. He made sure there was no obvious evidence of what he had done. Then he unlocked the gate, drove out, and locked it again behind him. He drove home to Sharon and Jonathan. He ate dinner with his family. He went to bed and slept. 2 weeks later, when Marion paid him for his work, Denise Roach's body was still in that pond. The water was breaking it down. Fish and other aquatic life were disturbing it. Decomposition was making the body less and less recognizable as human. But the evidence of Samuel's crime was right there, hidden beneath the surface of Marion's property. Samuel, for his part, had learned something important. He had learned that he could commit murder on this property and face no consequences. He had killed a woman, hidden her body, and gotten away with it completely. No police had come asking questions. No investigators had searched the property. Marion had not noticed anything suspicious. As May turned to June 1996, Denise Roach's body remained in the pond. The water continued its slow work of decomposition. The evidence of what Samuel had done stayed hidden beneath the surface. He had found the perfect place. He had the access. He had the privacy. He had proven to himself that he could do it without getting caught. The only question now was when he would return to Marion Whitehurst's property to kill again. For 16 days, Samuel Smithers went about his normal routine. He did maintenance work. He spent time with his family. If you're finding this documentary informative, give it a thumbs up. It helps other true crime viewers discover this content. And if you have thoughts about what you've heard so far, drop a comment below. We read every comment and value your perspective. Now, let's get back to the story. On May 28, 1996, Samuel drove back to East Hillsborough Avenue in Tampa. Once again, he was looking for a woman. This time, he found Christy Cowan. Christy, at 31, was older than Denise had been. She had fought harder against her addiction and lost harder. Her father still loved her, still hoped she would recover. But on the night of May 28th, Christy needed money for drugs. So when Samuel pulled up in his truck, she negotiated a price and got in. Before leaving Tampa, Samuel stopped at a convenience store on East Hillsborough Avenue. Security cameras recorded the transaction. The timestamp read 6:19 p.m. Samuel and Christy were visible on the footage. They purchased snack chips and a Minute Maid orange drink. Christy was alive and appeared unharmed. She had no idea she had less than an hour to live. Samuel drove east toward Plant City. He drove to the Whitehurst property. He unlocked the gate with his key. He locked it again once they were inside. Christy was now in the same isolated location where Denise Roach had died just over 2 weeks earlier. According to Samuel's later confession, he and Christy had sex first. This was what he had paid for. But then, he said, they argued about money. Christy wanted more than they had agreed upon. The argument escalated. Samuel picked up an axe, a long-handled axe he kept on the property for yard work. He swung it at Christy's head. The blade connected with her skull. The medical examiner would later document multiple head wounds, skull fractures, a laceration, blunt impact injuries, and a chop wound that penetrated her brain. But Christy didn't die immediately. Samuel also strangled her. His hands wrapped around her throat, he squeezed. The injuries were consistent with manual strangulation. Samuel grabbed Christy by her feet and dragged her across the property. The drag marks scored the ground. He pulled her to the same pond where Denise Roach's body already lay. He threw Christy into the water. Samuel now had 2 bodies on the property. 2 women had gotten into his truck. Two women had trusted him enough to drive miles from Tampa. Two women were at the bottom of a pond on land he was supposed to be maintaining. Samuel Smithers also had a problem. He needed to clean the axe. Blood covered the blade and handle. He couldn't leave it in the garage where Marion Whitehurst might see it. Marion had not given advance notice that she was coming on May 28, 1996. She decided to stop by the Plant City property around 7 p.m., just after Samuel had disposed of Christy Cowan's body. Marion wanted to check on the lawn maintenance and see if the property was ready to show to potential buyers. When Marion pulled up to the property, she found the gate unlocked. Samuel's truck was parked near the carport. As Marion walked toward the house, she saw Samuel in the carport area. He was hosing off a long-handled axe. Marion noticed the axe was wet. Samuel was cleaning it carefully. Then Marion's eyes moved to the concrete floor of the carport. A large pool of blood spread across the ground. The blood was fresh. Mixed with the blood were what looked like Dorito chips. Though Marion couldn't be certain, Marion asked Samuel about the blood. Samuel looked at the pool, then back at Marion. He said something must have come by and killed a small animal. Maybe a squirrel, he suggested. He promised he would clean it up. His voice was calm. He continued hosing the axe. Marion felt uncomfortable. The amount of blood seemed wrong for a squirrel. The situation felt wrong. Samuel's explanation didn't make sense. Why would an animal be killed in the carport? Why would there be so much blood? As Marion looked around the property, she noticed marks in the grass. The marks looked like something heavy had been dragged from the carport area toward the back of the property, toward one of the ponds. The grass was flattened in two parallel lines. Marion left the property feeling disturbed. She couldn't shake the image of Samuel calmly cleaning the axe, the blood on the ground, the strange explanation about an animal. When she got home, she called the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Department. A deputy named Skolnick agreed to meet Marion at the property later that evening. When they arrived together, Samuel was gone. The blood had been cleaned up, but the drag marks were still visible in the grass, leading from the carport toward the pond. Deputy Skolnick followed the marks. They led directly to the edge of one of the three ponds. The deputy noted the marks in his report and began to consider what might be in that water. Marion told the deputy about finding Samuel with the axe, about the blood, about his explanation that didn't make sense. She told him Samuel had a key to the gate. She told him Samuel was supposed to be maintaining the property, not cleaning axes covered in blood. The deputy called for additional units. By late evening on May 28, 1996, police were preparing to search the ponds on the Whitehurst property. They had no idea yet that there were two bodies in the water. They had no idea that Samuel Smithers, the trusted church deacon Marion had hired, had murdered two women on the land she owned. The Hillsborough County Sheriff's Department sent a dive team to the Whitehurst property. 3 ponds spread across the 27 acres. The drag marks led to the middle pond. Divers entered the dark water on the evening of May 28, 1996. They found Christy Cowan first. Her body floated just below the surface. She had been in the water for less than 2 hours. They could see the massive trauma to her head. They could see the wounds that had killed her. They pulled her body from the pond and laid it on the bank. But the divers weren't finished. As they continued to search the pond, they found a second body. This one had been in the water much longer. Decomposition was severe. The body was bloated and damaged by time in the water. It took longer to bring this second body to the surface. The second victim was Denise Roach. She had been in the pond for 16 days. The medical examiner would have difficulty determining exact details because of the decomposition, but the wounds were still visible. More than 10 stab wounds to the head. Several had penetrated her skull and brain, fractures to her face and skull, a fractured hyoid bone indicating strangulation. 2 women, 2 brutal murders. Both bodies in the same pond on a property where Samuel Smithers had unlimited access. The detectives immediately knew they needed to find Samuel. At around midnight on May 28, 1996, Detectives Flair and Metzgar drove to Plant City. They arrived at Samuel's home just before midnight. Samuel was there with his wife, Sharon. The detectives asked if Samuel would come with them to the sheriff's office in Ybor City to answer some questions. They told him they had found 2 bodies on the Whitehurst property. Samuel agreed to go. He asked if Sharon could come with them. The detectives allowed this. During the 30-minute drive from Plant City to the Ybor City Sheriff's Office, no one spoke about the investigation. Sharon sat in the car with her husband, not knowing what was about to unfold. As they walked from the parking lot into the sheriff's office, Sharon turned to Detective Flair. She asked a simple question. "Do we need a lawyer?" The detective didn't answer directly. Inside the building, Samuel was separated from Sharon. He was taken to an interrogation room. Detectives read him his Miranda rights. Samuel waived those rights. He agreed to speak without an attorney present. The interrogation began just after midnight on May 29, 1996. The detectives knew Samuel had the key to the gate. They knew Marion Whitehurst had found him cleaning an axe with blood everywhere. They knew the drag marks led from where Samuel had been standing to the pond where the bodies were found. Samuel had a choice. He could refuse to talk. He could ask for a lawyer. Sharon had already asked if they needed one, but Samuel didn't ask for a lawyer. Instead, he started to talk. Samuel Smithers sat in the interrogation room at the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office. Detective Metzgar took the lead in questioning. The room was small and plain. A table separated Samuel from the detectives. A recording device captured everything. Detective Metzgar asked Samuel if he knew why they had brought him in. Samuel said he assumed it was about the bodies on the Whitehurst property. The detective asked if Samuel knew the women. Samuel said he did. Then Samuel began to tell a story. He admitted to being with both women. He admitted to taking them to the Plant City property. But his version of events painted himself as less culpable than the evidence suggested. For Denise Roach, Samuel claimed it was an accident. He said he found Denise trespassing on the Whitehurst property. This claim made no sense, since multiple witnesses would later testify that Samuel regularly picked up prostitutes on Hillsborough Avenue. Samuel said he confronted Denise about trespassing. A fight broke out. During the fight, Samuel said he shoved Denise against a wall. According to Samuel's story, when he shoved Denise against the wall, a piece of wood fell from a shelf above. The wood struck Denise in the face. The blow killed her. Samuel said he panicked. He didn't call police. He didn't call an ambulance. Instead, he said he left her body there and went home. Samuel claimed he returned to the property the next day and found Denise dead. That's when he dragged her body to the pond and disposed of it. The story was full of problems. If the wood had fallen and struck Denise, it wouldn't explain the more than 10 stab wounds to her head. It wouldn't explain the fractured skull or the strangulation. For Christy Cowan, Samuel told a different story. He admitted to meeting Christy on Hillsborough Avenue. He admitted to paying her for sex. He said he was driving home from work when he saw a car broken down on the side of the road. He stopped to help. The driver was Christy Cowan. Samuel said he drove Christy to a convenience store. This part was true. Security camera footage had captured them together at 6:19 p.m., buying snacks and a drink. But Samuel's explanation for what happened next was self-serving. Samuel claimed that once they were back in his truck, Christy demanded money from him. She threatened to accuse him of assault if he didn't pay her. Samuel said he only had $26 on him. Christy wasn't satisfied. She threw a drink at him. According to Samuel, this made him angry. He picked up an axe that was in his truck. He swung it at Christy's head. He admitted to hitting her with the axe. He admitted that after hitting her, he dragged her to the pond. He said he threw her into the water while she was still breathing. Detective Metzgar pressed Samuel on the details. The detective knew Samuel's stories didn't match the physical evidence. The detective knew Samuel was minimizing his actions, trying to make the murders seem less planned, less brutal than they were. During the interrogation, Samuel made a revealing statement about Denise Roach. He told the detective he had hit Roach and continued to hit her because some prejudice may have set in because she was black. This statement contradicted his earlier claim that her death was an accident caused by falling wood. Detective Metzgar also used a technique during the interrogation that would later be challenged in court. Knowing Samuel was religious, knowing Samuel had been a deacon, the detective made appeals to Samuel's faith. The detective suggested that God would want Samuel to tell the truth. The detective suggested confession was good for the soul. Samuel continued to talk. He gave more details. He admitted to having sex with Christy before killing her. He admitted to locking the gate at the Whitehurst property so no one could interrupt. He admitted to knowing Denise's body was already in the pond when he brought Christy there. By the end of the interrogation, Samuel had confessed to both murders. The confessions were recorded. Samuel had waived his Miranda rights. He had spoken voluntarily, without a lawyer present. The detectives had what they needed. Samuel Smithers was arrested and charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. Sharon was allowed to go home. She had to tell Jonathan that his father wasn't coming home, that he had been arrested, that he had confessed to killing 2 women. The confessions would become crucial evidence at trial. But Samuel's story was about to change again. After his arrest, Samuel Smithers was appointed a defense attorney. He sat in jail while the state prepared its case. The evidence against him was substantial. His confession, the bodies on property he had access to, Marion Whitehurst's testimony about finding him with the bloody axe, the security footage of him with Christy Cowan just before her death. Samuel met with his defense attorney and the mental health experts hired to evaluate him. Dr. Michael Maher, a forensic psychiatrist, interviewed Samuel 5 times. Dr. Robert Burland, a psychologist, also conducted extensive evaluations. Both doctors were told about Samuel's confession to police. But now, months after his arrest, Samuel told the mental health experts a completely different story. He no longer admitted to killing either woman. Instead, he introduced a new character, Mr. X. According to this new version, Samuel had been having an affair. A woman named Mimi had been doing court-ordered community service at the church where Samuel was a deacon. Mimi couldn't complete her required hours. She offered to have sex with Samuel if he would falsify her timesheets. Samuel agreed. This part of the story was actually true. Church records confirm Samuel had been forced to resign as deacon in 1995 because of this incident. But what Samuel added next was new. Samuel claimed that after the deal with Mimi, an unidentified man approached him. This man, whom Samuel called Mr. X, had somehow learned about the arrangement with Mimi. Mr. X threatened to tell Samuel's wife about the affair unless Samuel cooperated with a scheme. Mr. X wanted to use the Whitehurst property for drug deals. He would pay Samuel $200 to leave the gate unlocked on certain nights. Samuel, afraid of his wife discovering the affair, agreed. According to Samuel's new story, he was at the Whitehurst property when Mr. X arrived with Denise Roach. Samuel claimed he watched as Mr. X struck Denise with a hatchet. Mr. X then ordered Samuel to help dispose of the body. Samuel said he was threatened with a tire iron. Fearing for his life, he dragged Denise's body to the pond while Mr. X watched. The story continued with Christy Cowan. Samuel claimed Mr. X brought Christy to the property as well. Again, Mr. X killed her while Samuel watched. Again, Samuel was forced to help dispose of the body. Samuel's defense team investigated the Mr. X story. They tried to find any evidence that this person existed. They looked for drug activity in the Plant City area. They interviewed people Samuel claimed might have seen Mr. X. Every lead went nowhere. One detail Samuel gave about Mr. X was particularly problematic. Samuel claimed that a man named Dean Snyder had been present during one of the incidents. Samuel said Dean Snyder had actually interacted with Mr. X. When investigators interviewed Dean Snyder, he denied any knowledge of Mr. X. He denied being present during any incident at the Whitehurst property. Despite the lack of evidence, Samuel's defense team faced a difficult choice. Their client had confessed to police, which was damaging, but he was now claiming innocence and blaming someone else. If they put Samuel on the stand to testify about Mr. X, the jury would hear his version of events. But the prosecution would then use his confession against him, showing the jury how his story had changed. Samuel's attorneys also had to consider the mental health evidence. Dr. Burland diagnosed Samuel with psychotic episodes. Dr. Maher found evidence of dissociative disorder and later changed it to psychotic episode recurrent. Both doctors noted that Samuel scored high on psychosis scales during testing. The defense team wondered if Samuel's Mr. X story was a delusion, a product of his damaged brain creating false memories. But Dr. Marr didn't think so. He thought Samuel was lying, not delusional. Samuel knew right from wrong. He knew what he had done. He was creating a story to avoid responsibility. As the trial date approached, Samuel's defense team had to decide whether to present the Mr. X defense, knowing it was likely fabricated, or to focus entirely on mental health mitigation and hope for a life sentence instead of death. They decided to let Samuel testify. They decided to present the Mr. X story to the jury, despite its obvious problems. It was a gamble that would ultimately fail. Samuel Smithers went to trial on December 14, 1998. 2.5 years after killing Denise Roach and Christy Cowan. Judge William Fuente presided over the case. The prosecution sought the death penalty and presented overwhelming evidence against Samuel. The defense tried to get the two murder charges separated and attempted to suppress Samuel's confession, but Judge Fuente denied both motions. The judge also allowed graphic photographs of the victims and testimony about Samuel's pattern of soliciting prostitutes. Marianne Whitehurst testified about finding Samuel cleaning a bloody axe at her property. The medical examiner described the brutal injuries both women suffered, including stab wounds, skull fractures, and strangulation. Sex workers from Hillsborough Avenue identified Samuel as a regular customer who tried to lure women to remote locations. Security footage showed Samuel with Christy Cowan less than an hour before her death. Most damaging was Samuel's own recorded confession admitting to the murders. Samuel took the stand and told a completely different story. He claimed a mysterious man named Mr. X had blackmailed him and committed both murders while Samuel watched helplessly. During cross-examination, the prosecutor destroyed this story by showing Samuel could not answer basic questions about Mr. X and that his testimony contradicted his earlier confession. The jury found Samuel guilty of both murders on December 18, 1998. During the penalty phase, the prosecution argued the murders were heinous and premeditated. The defense presented evidence of Samuel's abusive childhood, brain damage from head injuries, and mental illness. Experts testified that Samuel suffered from psychotic episodes and scored high on tests measuring breaks from reality. The prosecution countered that Samuel knew right from wrong because he hid evidence and lied. In an unexpected moment, Christy Cowan's father John testified against executing Samuel. He said his daughter would not have wanted more violence done in her name. He opposed the death penalty on religious grounds and worried about the harm to Samuel's family. Despite this powerful plea, the jury had heard detailed evidence of the brutal crimes and now had to decide Samuel's fate. On January 25, 1999, the jury unanimously recommended death for Samuel Smithers. All 12 jurors agreed that the aggravating factors outweighed the mitigation. The jury found that two brutal murders, both heinous and cruel, with one being cold and calculated, were too severe for the mitigating circumstances to overcome. Judge William Fuente held the formal sentencing hearing on June 25, 1999. He conducted a thorough review of the evidence and made his own findings. For Denise Roach's murder, the judge found two aggravating circumstances. The first was that Christy's murder counted as a prior violent felony. The second was that the killing was heinous, atrocious, and cruel, based on the extensive injuries including skull fractures, brain penetration, and strangulation. For Christy Cowan's murder, Judge Fuente found 3 aggravators, including the same 2 as Denise's case, plus a third finding that the murder was cold, calculated, and premeditated because Samuel already knew Denise's body was in the pond when he brought Christy there. The judge acknowledged the mitigating factors. He gave moderate weight to Samuel's extreme mental or emotional disturbance at the time of the murders and his impaired capacity to appreciate his conduct. He also gave moderate weight to Samuel's difficult childhood, positive character testimony, and good behavior in jail. Judge Fuente even gave great weight to John Cowan's powerful request for a life sentence instead of execution. However, after weighing everything, Judge Fuente concluded the aggravating circumstances far outweighed the mitigation. He sentenced Samuel Smithers for both murders. Samuel was 46 years old when he was sent to death row at Florida State Prison to begin what would become decades of appeals. Florida State Prison sits near the small town of Stark, about 45 miles southwest of Jacksonville. The prison houses Florida's death row for male inmates. Samuel Smithers arrived there in 1999, joining more than 300 other men awaiting execution. Death row at Florida State Prison is divided into cells that measure approximately 6 by 9 feet. Inmates spend 23 hours a day in these cells. They are allowed 1 hour for recreation, usually in a small outdoor area surrounded by high walls and wire. Samuel adapted to the routine. According to testimony from Deputy Ray Cruz, who worked at the facility, Samuel was a model inmate. He followed all rules. He caused no disturbances. He interacted respectfully with guards and other inmates. Life on death row is one of waiting. Inmates wait for appeals to be filed, for courts to issue rulings, for execution dates to be set or stayed. Some men wait decades. The isolation and uncertainty affect different people in different ways. For Samuel, the waiting period would last 26 years. During that time, his case would go through every level of the judicial system. His attorneys would raise dozens of legal claims, challenging his conviction and sentence on multiple grounds. Sharon divorced Samuel after his conviction. Their son Jonathan grew up visiting his father in prison, trying to maintain some relationship despite the horror of what Samuel had done. The family Samuel had presented to the world, the deacon with the wife and son, was destroyed by the truth of who Samuel really was. On death row, Samuel had time to think about Denise Roach and Christy Cowan. He had time to think about their children growing up without mothers. He had time to think about John Cowan's testimony, about a father who had lost his daughter but still didn't want Samuel to die. The mental health issues that the doctors had documented continued. Samuel's brain damage didn't improve with time. If anything, as he aged, the cognitive decline became more pronounced. By his 70s, experts would note that he was showing signs of progressing dementia. But none of this changed the legal reality. Samuel had been convicted. He had been sentenced to death. The jury had voted unanimously. The judge had found the aggravating factors far outweighed the mitigation. Unless his appeals were successful, Samuel would eventually be executed. The question was when. In Florida, the governor signs death warrants, setting execution dates for specific inmates. For years, Samuel waited without a warrant being signed. Governors came and went. Some signed many warrants, others signed few. Samuel remained on death row, year after year, growing older in his small cell. He watched other inmates get execution dates. He watched some win stays at the last minute. He watched others be taken to the death chamber and never return. The prison staff would count one fewer inmate on death row, and life would continue for those still waiting. By 2025, Samuel had been on death row for 26 years. He was 72 years old. He had watched Florida's death penalty system evolve through different legal challenges. He had seen the method of execution change from the electric chair to lethal injection. He had seen the rules about jury recommendations change after the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in Hurst v. Florida that juries, not just judges, must find the facts necessary for a death sentence. But Samuel's case was unaffected by these changes. His jury had voted 12-0 for death. Under any version of Florida's death penalty law, his case qualified for execution. The only questions were whether his appeals would succeed and whether a governor would sign his death warrant. Samuel's defense team filed their first appeal to the Florida Supreme Court in October 1999, challenging the conviction on multiple grounds. They argued that trying both murder charges together prejudiced the jury, that the confession was coerced through religious appeals, and that the aggravating factors were not properly supported. The Florida Supreme Court rejected all these arguments on May 16, 2002, finding the murders were properly tried together, the confession was voluntary, and the evidence supported all aggravating factors. The U.S. Supreme Court denied review on February 24, 2003. Samuel's attorneys then filed post-conviction motions, claiming his trial lawyers were ineffective for failing to challenge certain jurors, exclude damaging statements, adequately investigate mental health issues, and hire independent medical experts. After an evidentiary hearing, the Circuit Court denied these claims in October 2007. The Florida Supreme Court affirmed this denial on July 9, 2009, finding that Samuel's attorneys had made reasonable strategic decisions, and the fact they lost did not prove ineffectiveness. Samuel's attorneys moved to federal court in October 2009, filing a habeas corpus petition in the U.S. District Court for the Middle District of Florida. The District Court denied the petition on June 15, 2011, finding no constitutional violations. The 11th Circuit Court of Appeals affirmed this decision on January 16, 2013, and the U.S. Supreme Court denied certiorari on April 15, 2013. Every federal court found no basis for relief. In 2016, the U.S. Supreme Court decided Hurst v. Florida, ruling that juries rather than judges must find facts necessary for death sentences. Samuel filed a successive motion in January 2017 based on this new ruling, but the Florida Supreme Court denied it on March 29, 2018. Because Samuel's jury had unanimously recommended death by a vote of 12-0, any Hurst error was considered harmless beyond reasonable doubt. By 2025, Samuel had exhausted nearly all legal options. He was 72 years old and had been on death row for 26 years. Medical evaluations showed cognitive decline and signs of progressing dementia. On September 13, 2025, Governor Ron DeSantis signed a death warrant scheduling Samuel's execution for October 15, 2025. This would make Samuel the 14th person executed in Florida that year, breaking the state's previous record of 8 executions in a single year. Samuel's attorneys filed one final novel appeal on September 19, 2025, arguing that executing a 72-year-old man violated the Eighth Amendment's prohibition on cruel and unusual punishment. They presented evidence of his declining health and cognitive function, arguing that executing elderly inmates serves no legitimate purpose of deterrence or retribution. They noted that 30 states effectively do not execute elderly inmates, and that Florida had never executed anyone over 70 in the modern death penalty era. The state responded that Samuel should have raised this claim when he turned 65 in 2018, making it procedurally barred. They also argued no Supreme Court precedent recognized an age-based exemption for anyone over 18. Circuit Judge Michelle Cisco denied the motion on September 26, 2025, and the Florida Supreme Court affirmed on October 7, 2025, just 7 days before the scheduled execution. The court ruled that Florida must interpret cruel and unusual punishment in conformity with U.S. Supreme Court decisions. And since the Supreme Court had never recognized an elderly exemption, Florida courts could not create one. On October 8, 2025, Samuel's attorneys filed an emergency stay application with the U.S. Supreme Court. On the afternoon of October 14, 2025, just hours before the scheduled 6 o'clock execution, the Supreme Court denied both the stay and the petition for review without comment. Samuel had no more appeals and no more legal options remaining. Samuel Smithers woke up on October 14, 2025 at 6:30 in the morning. He had spent the night in a cell near the execution chamber at Florida State Prison. This was not his regular cell on death row. This was the final holding cell, where inmates spend their last hours. For his last meal, Samuel requested fried chicken, fried fish, a baked potato, apple pie with vanilla ice cream, and sweet tea. The prison prepared the meal and brought it to him. Whether he ate all of it, whether he enjoyed it, was not reported. Samuel did not request any visitors on his final day. His ex-wife Sharon did not come. His son Jonathan did not come. Whatever private goodbyes they needed to make had already happened during previous visits, or perhaps they had chosen not to come at all. Samuel also did not meet with a spiritual advisor. This was notable given his history as a church deacon, given his religious upbringing. But Samuel spent his final hours alone, without pastoral comfort, without anyone praying over him. Outside the prison, About 30 protesters gathered on the lawn across from the entrance. Most belonged to Our Lady of Lourdes Church in Daytona Beach. This church brought people by coach bus to every execution in Florida, bearing witness against what they believed was state-sanctioned killing. The protesters held umbrellas instead of their usual tent. The October sky was cloudless, the sun still warm at this late hour. They had brought a gong that they struck rhythmically, marking time as the execution hour approached. As 6 o'clock approached, the protesters lined up to strike the gong one final time. Inside the prison, Samuel Smithers was being prepared for execution. The moment everyone had been waiting for, dreading or hoping for, was about to arrive. At exactly 6 o'clock on October 14, 2025, the curtain to the death chamber opened. Witnesses in the viewing room could now see inside. Samuel Smithers was already strapped to a gurney. Leather restraints held his arms, legs, and torso. An IV line had been inserted into his arm. The execution protocol called for witnesses from several groups. Representatives from the victims' families had the right to watch. Media witnesses were present to report what happened. Prison officials oversaw the procedure. Everyone sat in silence, looking through the glass at Samuel. A prison official asked Samuel if he had any final words. This was his last opportunity to speak, to apologize, to explain, to say anything he wanted the world to hear. Samuel's response was brief. "No, sir," he said. Those were his final words. No apology to Denise Roach's children or Christy Cowan's father. No explanation for why he had done what he did. No religious statement despite his background as a deacon. Just 2 words, and then silence. The administration of the lethal drugs began almost immediately. Florida used a 3-drug protocol. The first drug was a sedative meant to render the inmate unconscious. The second drug paralyzed the muscles. The third drug stopped the heart. Initially, Samuel's breathing became heavy. His chest rose and fell rapidly. Then he underwent slight convulsions, his body tensing against the restraints. Witnesses watched, some looking away, some staring intently. The convulsions stopped. Samuel's breathing slowed, then became shallow. All voluntary movement ceased. A warden approached the gurney and shook Samuel's shoulder, calling his name. There was no response. As minutes passed, Samuel's complexion began to turn gray. The blood was no longer circulating properly. His face took on the pallor of death. At 6:14 p.m., a medic entered the chamber. The medic checked Samuel's vital signs, listening for a heartbeat, checking for a pulse, looking for any sign of life. Finding none, the medic stepped back. At 6:15 p.m., Samuel Lee Smithers was pronounced dead. 72 years, 8 months, and 14 days after his birth in Tennessee, 29 years after he murdered Denise Roach and Christy Cowan, 26 years after being sentenced to death, Samuel's life ended on a gurney in Florida State Prison. Department of Corrections spokesman Ted Veerman told reporters that the execution was carried out without incident. There were no complications. The protocol had been followed correctly. Samuel had been executed as ordered by the court and authorized by the governor. Samuel became the 14th person executed in Florida in 2025, setting a new state record. He became the oldest person executed in Florida's modern death penalty era. He became another name on the long list of people who had committed terrible crimes and paid for them with their lives. If you found this documentary informative and thought-provoking, please consider subscribing to our channel. We bring you well-researched true crime stories that go beyond the headlines, examining the complex human stories behind the crimes that shape our justice system. Hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss our next documentary. If you appreciated the depth of research and storytelling in this video, give it a thumbs up and share it with others who are interested in true crime and criminal justice. Leave a comment below telling us what aspect of this case stood out to you most.